November 29th, 2020. It is 7:02 p.m. As a preliminary matter, my name is Peter Carlson. I'm the chair of the Town of Grafton Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on this agenda are present and can hear me this evening. Going down the list, Mr. Often.
I am here.
Ms. Roy,
Roy here.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee here.
Mr. Carter Taranzini, temporary town administrator. I don't see him on yet.
Pete, I think he's on as a guest. I don't know if he needs to be promoted or what.
Thank you. I'll do that right now. Thank you. Good evening, Carter.
Present.
Thank you. And absent tonight is Ms. DeFazio. She will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. I'm named Peter Carlson here. Ms. Ginny Kramer, General Counsel for the Town of Grafton.
Good afternoon or evening.
Good evening. And tonight with us, we have Mark Haddad, Chair of the TA Search Committee.
Present.
Thank you. And this evening we have Mr. Bernie Lynch, Principal, President of Paradigm Associates.
Present.
And we have Ms. Sharon Flaherty, Associate of Paradigm Associates.
Present.
Thank you. And Mr. Sean Briggs, co-owner of Reunion Tap and Table. Okay. Good evening, everyone. This open meeting of the Town of Grafton Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order from March 12, 2020 due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting tonight will not feature any public comment. For this meeting, Select Board is convened via Zoom conference as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that people may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please note that all supporting materials have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website when final minutes are posted unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chair, note otherwise. Before we turn to the first item of the agenda, please permit me to set some ground rules for this evening. I, as the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold your name as called further. If you'd like to have the floor, you may also do so by raising your hand, and I will acknowledge you. Please remind me if I skip over you. I do apologize. Doing this via Zoom meeting can be tricky from time to time. If members wish to, let me see, I got to that. I'm sorry. Finally, any vote that may be taken tonight will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay, so before we go into the first agenda item tonight, I would like to ask the board for their indulgence to take an item out of order. This should only take a few minutes, and that is C, action item regarding set date interview for town administrator finalists. Is there any objection from the board? Okay, seeing none. I would like to introduce Mr. Mark Haddad.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry?
Just a quick point of order. You mentioned that there would be no public comment tonight. We're doing a public hearing, and I think there's a requirement for public comment.
Mr. Oppen, this is not a public hearing under the Mass General Law. This is just a hearing between the Select Board and owner of a business.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. That's a good question. Before we go any further, I have tonight with us Mr. Mark Haddad, who is the chair of the Town Administrator Search Committee, and with him tonight is Mr. Bernie Lynch, principal of Paradigm Associates, and with his associate Sharon Flaherty. Mark, Bernie, Sharon, thank you very much for attending tonight. I know we have some good news, and tonight we want to set some future dates for some final interviews for the finalists. Mr. Haddad.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could just give a brief overview of the process, and then I'll turn it over to Bernie to talk about the candidates. But I would be remiss if I didn't recognize and thank the members of the Town Administrator Search Committee, made up of Elizabeth Spinney, who was the vice chair, Karen Sepatelli, who was the clerk, Heather McHugh, Dave Robbins, Chris LeMay, Steve Burke, Jim Sullivan, and of course, Ed Prisby. And working with Paradigm Associates was a great experience for the committee. Bernie, John Petrin, and Sharon Flaherty were outstanding, providing us with guidance and leading us and helping us conduct the search. And I think at the end of the day, we're delivering to you 3 candidates that have varying backgrounds and have varying strengths and will allow this board strong candidates, and we're very, very excited about the process. And just to give you a quick idea, the way the committee worked with Bernie and John and Sharon, the first thing we did was we decided to do a survey to get community input so that we could help Bernie draft the community profile that was used to attract candidates. We had over 100 responses to our survey. We took those surveys and we helped, and Bernie took some of the information and he put it into the community profile. So the community did have input into what we were looking for the next town administrator. We spent a night reviewing resumes. We spent 2 nights worth of interviews. We spent 1 night, a long night of deliberation to decide who we wanted to bring forward and recommend to you, the 3 finalists that we're bringing forward to you. So overall, it was an outstanding process, and I can't thank Paradigm Associates enough. And of course, the members of the committee who were just outstanding. They gave a lot of their time and effort, many, many hours working on this to make sure that we were bringing you 3 really, really strong candidates moving forward. So I wanted to thank the committee. I want to thank Bernie, and I wanted to thank the board for working with us and allowing us to bring this forward tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haddad. Appreciate that. Mr. Lynch?
I guess I'll jump in at this point and echo much of what Mark just said. The committee was really, you had an excellent search committee in place that did an outstanding amount of work and brought a lot of great ideas and guidance to the process, and we were very pleased to be able to work with them. I can tell you that we're not always so fortunate in every community that we do work with that the committees work as well as they did in the town of Grafton. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say a large part of that was the leadership that Mark showed as chair. He kept the meetings moving right along, kept it productive, kept us focused, and I think that the end result was really a well-oiled machine of the committee doing its job. And I concur with his sentiments and the committee's sentiments that we have 3 strong candidates to present to you tonight. We did pull together the position profile. We worked with the board in crafting that and in putting out the board's thoughts about what you were looking for as the governing body from the next town administrator, what the key issues were. We talked to the department heads and other members of the staff to get their thoughts. And as Mark pointed out, the committee really wanted us to do this. We wanted to reach out to the community. And with the help of Mark and Liz and the other members of the committee, we did a survey. We got great feedback from people, some great ideas that we incorporated into that profile that the board approved. And that profile really served a great purpose for us in promoting the position to the candidates that are out there looking at positions like this. And it also helped the committee, I think, in identifying the issues that we wanted to focus on as we questioned the candidates and then evaluated those candidates. We ended up with 33 different people applying for the position, and it was not an easy task. I can tell you that I was just looking through the resumes quickly here. sort of prepping for the meeting. And we had, when we do these searches, we basically break down the candidates into 3 different categories. The tier 1 candidates are those that have done the job of being a town administrator, have some experience that we can point to and try to understand what they can bring to the job. The tier 2 candidates are people that may have some municipal experience, may not have served as a town administrator in another community, but they have municipal experience that might be beneficial to serving in this capacity. And we had outstanding candidates in that group. And then we had a tier 3 category, which again, strong, just didn't have the municipal experience that you really need to have in order to move forward into a position like this. But out of those 33 people, I have to say that there were probably 25 of them that you could have put into this position. So the committee really did a lot of work going through each one of the candidates with resumes, talking about what they could bring to the job. Ultimately ended up with, I think it was 8 candidates that were selected to move forward, as I recall, for interviews. We ended up only interviewing 7. 1 withdrew, had received another job offer, and that was more in line with what they were looking for. And so they opted to be out of the process. But we interviewed those 7 people. As Mark said, the interviews ranged anywhere from probably 75 minutes to 90 minutes or more with each one, really digging into their understanding of municipal government, their understanding of Grafton and the issues that the town is facing. And in the end, I think we every single candidate that we looked at had some level of support of one form or another. But we ended up with 3 strong candidates that we're presenting to you tonight. And then, of course, we want to get to tonight is the sort of scheduling out the process from here on out. What I've provided to you are the cover letters and resumes of each one of the candidates. I'll just quickly go through each candidate and a little bit about them. Evan Broussard is these are in alphabetical order. I should point out that the committee did not rank the candidates. They're submitted to you simply in alphabetical order. Evan Broussard is currently the town administrator in Monson, Massachusetts. It's a little bit smaller than Grafton, but he has a good long 6-year stint there, doing some good work in a number of different areas in terms of economic development, straightening out some of the financial issues that every community has. He has done some capital projects in Monson. He comes with a lot of energy, some good managerial experience, and so he's your first candidate. The second candidate is Joshua Garcia. Josh has served on his school committee in the city of Holyoke, his board of fire commissioners in the city of Holyoke. He worked for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, the regional planning agency out that part of the state, in working on a number of intermunicipal collaborations, sort of spearheading regionalization and the regionalization of services out that way. And then had the opportunity and really the challenge put to him because of a problem that one of the communities out there was having in terms of identifying a town administrator that he was helping to fill the position out there, helping them find someone. He stepped into it to take on the challenge of becoming the town administrator on at least an interim basis out in the town of Blandford, and has done a really an outstanding job dealing with the issues that Blandford has had in terms of their finances, in terms of their delivery of services, the regionalization that is necessary out that way, dealing closely with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Division of Local Services on a variety of issues. Again, comes with a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and excitement that he could bring to the job. So the committee felt that Josh was really an up-and-comer that you should take a look at. And then we have Ari Sky, and Ari brings a couple decades of experience in municipal government, primarily in the area of municipal finance. He's currently the Chief Financial Officer for the City of New Bedford. He served in some similar capacities in county government and city government in the Virginia and Pennsylvania area, and actually served as a township manager. I believe it was in Pennsylvania. So he's been a town administrator or town manager. He's worked in large organizations. He's worked in smaller organizations. Has been involved really in all aspects of municipal operations. And he too was someone who brought a little bit different perspective, sort of more focused in on finance perhaps, but as the CFO for the city of New Bedford, your portfolio is not just the financial, your portfolio is really the administrative as well. So the committee we felt that he was a choice that really should be brought forward to the board for your consideration. So I think we have 3 strong candidates for you. I've been in touch with all of them over the last couple of weeks. We've done their Corey checks. I can tell you that there are no issues with their criminal history systems board reports. We're doing the reference reports. Everything coming back has been very positive. We do preliminary background checks even before they get to the screening committee, but in talking to their references, we're pulling together that information now. We'll have a report to the board probably at the beginning of next week with just some feedback that we have from their references as to the types of projects they've been working on and the style that they bring to the position, and which hopefully will help you as you are interviewing these candidates. But all of them, I will tell you that as I've spoken to them, are very excited with the potential of being Grafton's next town administrator. And so I think you're going to have a real challenge in terms of deciding which one you want to go with. But I think all of them would be excellent choices for the town of Grafton. So that's my presentation. That's my report, the good news that we have for you. And now it's just a matter of talking about the process and identifying a date to do the interviews. These interviews generally last, as I say, about probably 60 to 75 minutes in length. They might go a little bit longer, but we really need to set aside either a chunk of probably about 4 hours all at one time, or if you wanted to try to break that in some way. But I would certainly urge you to try to do it in a way that it was close enough in time that you'd be able to compare the candidates, closely. So.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Appreciate that. And I think I speak on behalf of the whole committee and Town of Grafton. We thank you for all of the due diligence and the service that you've done. So tonight, we wanted to discuss about just setting up final interviews. We want to get that squared away. So Mr. Lynch and Mr. Haddad can facilitate and arrange for the final interview. So before we get into the next part of our agenda, I just want to see if we can just solidify that tonight before moving on. So just looking at the first available dates, and again, this is much sooner rather than later, would be 7 p.m. Wednesday, January 9th. I'm sorry, 6th, January 6th. And then another opportunity would be like Saturday morning, 10 a.m. On January 9th. I don't know what people think. Ms. Roy?
If we were to do January 6th, could we start at 6 instead of 7 so that we could not interview someone at, say, 10 o'clock at night necessarily?
I would certainly urge you to do that, to try to do it a little bit earlier if you could.
For the committee's information, we started at 4 o'clock to do our interviews so that we weren't running too late.
Right.
I'd suggest you start earlier than 6 if you're going to do it on a weeknight.
If we are doing it on the 6th, if we could do it, I have a 3:30, but I think we could probably be there for 5 o'clock if that was possible. So I don't know what the board's availability is for 5 o'clock on the 6th.
So I don't have one member here tonight, Ms. DeFazio. She couldn't make tonight's meeting. So the only thing I would say is that whatever date and time that we put in place, can we create 1 or 2 of them in case one doesn't work for her? She doesn't have an opportunity here tonight to voice her opinion. Okay. So if we were to consider 5 o'clock on January 6th, to Ms. Roy's point, something earlier, does that work for the 4 of us?
Mr. Chair, that works for me. I just want to, I guess, reiterate what they had said earlier. I think doing it in one sitting is better than 2, if only to avoid recency bias for whomever, inevitably we'll go through 2 and then maybe get to the last one. And that might, I don't want that to impact the decision-making process. So it's 5 o'clock is fine with me.
Okay, all right. With that taken, I agree, Mr. Prisby. Mr. Often, does 5 o'clock on the 6th work for you as the first date and time?
Yep, that works for me.
Great, that will work for me as well. Does the second date for 10 a.m. on Saturday, January 9th work for the committee? I got a nod of a head. Mr. Prisby, Mr. Often, myself. Okay. Mr. Lynch, Mr. Haddad, I would like to check with Mr. Fazio to see if one of those 2 dates work. If neither one of those 2 dates work for her, I will try to come up with another date with the committee and call you guys and figure out what works for you guys and get some more
Okay.
dates. Okay.
That sounds good. In the meantime, what I will do just for the board is we'll get that reference report complete. We'll get that off to you. I'm hoping by Monday evening to have that in your hands, just so you have that. And with that will come some draft questions that we might be able to use. We didn't talk about it tonight. Mark, do you have any thoughts as to the best approach to do the interviews? Or
Well, I'll tell you, the way we did it at the search committee, which worked really, really well, is Bernie led the interview questions. So he introduced the topic, got the candidate talking about the topic, and then the committee members chimed in with questions and follow-up questions. And it really helped move things along to make sure that all the candidates were hit with the same topics and the same questions moving forward. So I think it's a great way to have just one central point of person asking the questions and then allowing members of the board to chime in. So if Bernie's willing to do that, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that you follow the same process that our search committee followed, because it worked really, really well for us. Ed, I think you saw that was a good process.
Yeah, it actually was perfect because Bernie is a great facilitator like that. And what it sort of allowed us to do was allow Bernie to go through the same topics. But then, of course, each individual candidate has their own experience and their own background and their own skill set. So we were able to ask questions about maybe what they lacked and ask questions about specifics about their experience that we were interested in. So I thought it worked really well.
Thank you. The only thing I would ask the committee is maybe I'll put this on as a discussion item for Tuesday, just to give Ms. DeFazio just a chance to weigh in a little bit on that. All right. If she can make Wednesday, great. Or if she's going to make the Saturday meeting, I think that just gives her an opportunity beforehand. So if the committee's okay with that, I'll just add this as discussion item. Just we'll call it the interview process for select board and finalists. Okay.
okay, yep. Sounds good.
All right. Is there anything else that you have for us tonight? Mark, Bernie?
Nope, I don't think anything. Sharon, do you have
Sharon,
anything?
you've been very quiet.
The brains behind the operation, actually. So, all right.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much for coming in tonight. I wish you all a very happy new year. Stay
Same to you,
safe,
Mr.
please,
Chairman.
and we look forward to this next step. Thank you very much.
All right. Have a nice night.
Take care.
Good evening. Mr. Briggs, thank you for indulging us on that. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Next up on our schedule is we have a hearing regarding Union Tap and Table 198 LLC doing business as Reunion Tap and Table Entertainment Music License. So before we get into the first part of this, could I have a motion just to open the hearing for this, please?
I move the board vote to open the hearing for the music license for Reunion Tap and Table.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion on the motion to open the hearing? Seeing none. All those in favor by roll call, please. Mr. Often,
Tonight.
Mr. Prisby,
Frisbee, aye.
Roy,
Ms. Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Thank you. We'll declare the hearing open. I want to thank Mr. Briggs for coming out tonight. So just for the record, I would ask the clerk, before we get into the discussion item, if she would be, please read the license type that we have on file for Tap and Table 198, please.
License type music, license for inn holders, common victualers, and other keepers of restaurants and other establishments in accordance with the provision of Chapter 140 of the General Law as amended by Chapter 299 of the Acts of 1926 and amendments thereunto. License is hereby granted to Tap and Table 198 LLC doing business as Reunion Tap and Table to conduct the amusements as wherein described in connection with his regular business of inn holder, common victualler, or owner, manager, or controller of a cafe, restaurant, or other eating or drinking establishments on the premise of 198 Worcester Street, North Grafton, Mass. 01536. description of the premises is approximately 5,000 square feet freestanding building consisted of one floor and basement. The first floor has full-service restaurant and bar area with approximately seating for 200 patrons. Description of amusements to be conducted is acoustic music to be conducted on weekdays between the hours of noon and 1 a.m. and Fridays to 2 a.m. The license is granted as subject to the provision of the general laws, chapter 140, section 22 and 32, inclusive of a chapter 272, section 25 to 27, inclusive, and amendments thereunto, and shall not be valid for a location other than as wherein described. The license was granted by the Grafton Select Board. Suggested minimum regulations which will be required by the licensing authority before the approval of license issued in accordance with the provision of Chapter 299 Acts of 1926 and amended thereto. Number one, the license is granted and approved subject to compliance with the laws of the Commonwealth relative to exposing, sales, and keeping of liquor or other intoxicating beverages, and with compliance of the following conditions. Number two, the premise shall be open at all times to inspection by police officers or constables of the town or by any state police officer. Number three, no person or persons under the influence of intoxicating liquor or other intoxicating beverages or having the appearance thereof shall be granted admittance to or to be permitted to remain in or upon the premise described in the license. Number four, no dialogue, gesture, song, language, or conversation of any description which is directly or indirectly obscene, lascivious, or suggestive shall be permitted to be used by any person or persons upon while in or upon the premises. Number five, muscle or suggestive dancing of any description or form is prohibited. Number six, gaming of any description, games at which prizes is offered, any games where money is exposed as prize or inducement, wheels of chance, and jingle boards are prohibited. Number seven, private dining room booths or enclosures of accommodations of less than 4 persons shall not be permitted, and not less than 4 persons shall be allowed or permitted to occupy such rooms or enclosure. Number eight, rooms used for dining rooms and for dancing shall be so lighted as to render it possible to distinguish any persons by every other person there within at all times. And number nine, the license will be suspended for non-compliance with any of the laws of this Commonwealth relating to this particular establishment and may, after a hearing, be revoked. Town of Grafton, December 17th, 2019.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. Before we get into comments from the board and from Mr. Briggs, Ms. Kramer, did you have any opening remarks that you want to present? You got on mute.
Sorry. I don't have any opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So tonight we have with us here Mr. Sean Briggs, co-owner of Tap and Table 198. So I figure I would start with Mr. Briggs, if you wanted to give some opening remarks, and then we'll go down the list with each one of the each one of the members of the select board, please. Thank you.
For having me. I'd like to state for the record that the select board is moving forward with this hearing, despite knowing we have an open information request to the board, and they have so far not provided us with the information that was requested. So we're flying a little blind here. It's not news to anyone that the COVID pandemic has nearly destroyed the restaurant industry, and business isn't getting better anytime soon. We've gone from a staff of over 60 employees pre-pandemic to a current staff of 9, and due to the accusations, traffic and revenue is at an all-time low. Reunion Tap and Table, like most restaurants around the country, were forced to rely solely on takeout orders from March until early June, generating almost no revenue and resulting in employee layoffs and many permanent restaurant closures. In June, we were forced by our government to move our business outside. Many of us reinvented ourselves to try to survive. We erected expensive tents to keep patrons and staff safe, and we invited musicians to play in our parking lot outside of the tent. Entertainment became a staple of our identity. We are one of many Grafton restaurants that did exactly the same thing. We even had a restaurant in town, as the board is well aware of, that was allowed to have live music entertainment without an entertainment license. However, even though the summer months may have looked like a success to outsiders, realized that we were still operating only at 60% of our indoor capacity. We created a touch-free eating space using only disposable containers, cups, and cutlery to avoid exposure. We installed multiple sanitation stations and hired 2 additional full-time cleaning people that wiped down every surface between every customer visit, all at an enormous expense to us and others. Now, I'd like to state a few facts with regards to this hearing. We have had no cases traced back to Reunion since the pandemic started, 0 cases. Reunion Tap and Table has never been cited for any violations or received any fines for any COVID violations. We received 1 warning in June, of which no violation or fine was resolved. And on November 2nd, we received a cease and desist from the Department of Labor and Standards. We still don't know the origin of the complaint. We spoke to the Department of Labor and Standards about the cease and desist the day we received it. There were no resulting violations or fines related to that cease and desist order either. As the Select Board has been notified, the cease and desist has been rescinded by the Massachusetts Department of Labor and Standards, and Reunion Tap and Table is currently in full compliance with all COVID mandates. In fact, our only visits from the Health Alliance during the COVID mandate have resulted in passing marks in all areas. Specifically, in regards to live entertainment, on November 18th, 2020, the Alliance Food Establishments Report for Reunion Tap and Table, written by Alliance Inspector Daniel Edmonds, I quote, says, "The stage is not under the tent. This is the location the stage remained the entire season. It was never moved. It was never under the tent." The current information request we have is for documents that were never provided to us, showing anything different than these stated facts. I'd also like to point out to the Select Board the stated penalty for operation of a non-phase 3 enterprise in the mandate, the governor's stated mandate, violation of terms of COVID-19 order numbers 33, 37, 43, or 52 may result in a maximum civil fine of $300 per violation in the manner provided for in MGL C27770C. Nowhere does it state that a business should be denied a license as a penalty, especially businesses that haven't even received a fine for any violations. We have spoken to the Department of Labor and Standards, and they have verified the loss of license is not in the mandate as a penalty. I urge the Select Board to speak with the Department of Labor and Standards to verify this statement before making a hasty decision. This pandemic has created a difficult environment for our restaurant, and it's now an even more difficult environment because of these accusations that are being repeated by our town officials, on the Select Board, Board of Health, and the local press. These statements have damaged our business, our employees and their families, all of whom are local residents who are trying to make an honest living during a difficult time. We also feel that if it's necessary to continue this hearing, we insist that our license continue with it until the information that we've requested is provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs. It sounds like you had a statement already prepared. Is that something you can provide to us, a copy, just to put into the record?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Feel free to email the staff or myself, and I'll make sure that gets to Joanne in the morning. Thank you. All right. So any of the members would like to go first? Mr. Prisby.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Briggs, thank you very much for coming in. At the outset, I want to say I'm terribly, I'm upset and I'm sad for you. I like you. I like your restaurant. I've eaten there. I think the community values Reunion. You guys bring something different to the town that, as far as I know, we've never had. I said it before publicly. I'll say it again. Reunion is good reason for people who liked going out to dine on Shrewsbury Street to stay right here in Grafton and dine here. I think you've got a tremendous brand. But I do want to clear a few things up, both I think for you and for the benefit of the people watching. Since the pandemic started, small businesses, well, any business, but particularly small business with fewer resources to devote to an ever-changing myriad of regulations, have had to sort of figure out the hard way about how to go about operating a business, staying alive financially, but also keeping people alive physically. The threat of spreading COVID is very real, and unfortunately, it has been most acute as a threat to the survival of small businesses, which include restaurants and movie theaters. Epidemiologists the world around have identified that being in close quarters with other people who are eating talking and breathing next to each other is a greater threat than most other activities people can undertake. And so the brunt, unfortunately, has fallen on business owners like yourself to try and figure out how they can maintain a financial existence and stay in business, but also comply with the law. And unfortunately, it has fallen to volunteers on the Board of Health and employees of the Worcester Health Alliance to try and figure out on any given week and month what the new regulations are, because they changed all summer long, and how to go about enforcing those regulations. That's under one set of statutes. Our inquiry here is a little bit different, and it's also a creature of statute. It's an entirely different statute, Chapter 183A. And under Chapter 183A, a business in the community is empowered to come to the licensing authority, and that's us, and request a license to provide entertainment to their customers. And under the statute, we are to grant that license unless we find certain things. And one of the things, or a couple of things that we look for, is whether or not a license can be granted, but also in a way that protects employees, patrons, and members of the public inside or outside the premises from disruptive conduct, from criminal activity, or from health, safety, or fire hazards. And it's the health and safety hazards that concern us here today. It also mandates that we make a determination of whether or not we can prevent an unreasonable increase in the level of noise in the area caused by the license activity. I'll tell you right up front, I'm a little less concerned about the noise, and I'll get to that later. Every single restaurant in town who applies for an entertainment license has to run this gamut with us. They have to make application, and we have to come up with reasons to deny it if we so choose to deny it, okay? And I'll get to the process for that again in a minute. The reason why, from my perspective, that we're even having this conversation is over the course of the summer, I've become aware of, and I think other members of the board have become aware of, conversations back and forth between the Board of Health and the Worcester Health Alliance that indicate somewhat of a reluctance to follow through on some of the things you say you're following through on. And I appreciate your position on the document request. To the best of my knowledge, we got it last week. There's a 10-day response time. The reason we're having this conversation now is, as you know, the license expires on December 31. So if we're going to make a determination now, I think that's to your benefit. If, as I think Mr. Carlson has offered, if you want to continue the hearing until you get the documents, that's fine. Frankly, I would have preferred you have them too, because there's some correspondence here that I do want to go through that I think might be helpful to further this conversation, okay? Now, with regard to the position you find yourself in, as time was going on in June, it appears from the correspondence that I have that members of the Board of Health and the Worcester Health Alliance were concerned in early June about live entertainment at the premises at the time. And I'm looking at an email from June 10th from Phil Laguerre to Tim McInerney, Chris McGoldrick, and Rebecca Meekins, as well as Nancy Connors and members of the Board of Health concerning the live music. At the time, all that was required, I think, was from the Board of Health before a fine was implemented, was a verbal warning, a written warning, and then a financial penalty. That's the Board of Health's purview. Our purview always has been an ability under Section 9 of the license that Ms. Roy read aloud, if there was non-compliance with any laws of the Commonwealth relating to a particular establishment, after a hearing, the entertainment license could be revoked. That's separate and apart from the fine. We never got that far. And part of the reason we never got that far was because members of the town administration worked pretty hard not to get it to that point. So instead of just getting a verbal, a written, and then a fine, Tim McInerney reached out to Sargon, and I know members of the Board of Health reached out to Austin. And that was all in an effort to see if we could all get on the same page about entertainment. And Phil Laguerre reached out to Sargon concerning a license for entertainment. And Sargon wrote back to him, accusing him of trying to ruin his business, which no one's trying to ruin anyone's business, but the Board of Health and the Worcester Health Alliance are empowered under the law to apply the law to every business the same way. Then as time went on, concerning the live entertainment, there was a written warning that was issued on July 1st. And before that was issued, Phil Laguerre, again in an email, notes that under the COVID-19 guidance, the purpose of relaxed outdoor seating requirements is for folks to enjoy a meal. If you're attracting folks to come and listen to music, this defeats the purpose of the guidance. So while I appreciate, and I'm not trying to sound condescending here, I appreciate the brand and I appreciate what you're trying to do to keep your business alive, but this is guidance from the state that's saying, look, you can't be attracting patrons in as of this date. The purpose is to entertain them while they're there. That interaction resulted in some part with a warning letter dated July 1st, 2020, RE Outdoor Live Entertainment from the Board of Health. It reads in part, whereas on multiple days during the week of June 7th and continuing regularly since then, this business was observed open for business and having live musical entertainment in violation of COVID-19 order number 13. So that was the first warning. And apparently things quieted down from there, but picked up again in late July. In late July, Phil Laguerre, again from the Worcester Health Alliance, writes to Michael Flanagan of DLS. He says cease and desist, but really he means the written warning because there wasn't a cease and desist at that point. We had sent a cease and desist just prior to the change in allowing outside entertainment, which was July. Then the theater guidance was issued and we forwarded that with the restaurant guideline. One of the owners, Josh Briggs, is one of the entertainers, and he stated we were using the wrong guidance. He's also on the Grafton Board of Health. They then posted what they were doing on their Facebook page. And Michael Flanagan then responds and says, thank you, we'll take it from there. And then thereafter, there was an exchange in person, I believe, between Phil Laguerre, Chief of Environmental Health for the Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance, where Mr. Laguerre has a conversation with Sargon Hanna. And this was correspondence that's dated July 29th, 2020. Actually, this is to Mr. Laguerre. This is from Mass DLS. So Mass DLS writes, per your request, the Massachusetts Department of Labor Standards reviewed the videos posted on social media and engaged in a discussion with their observations with Sargon Hanna, one of the owners at Reunion Tap and Table. Mr. Hanna agreed that the spacing between the performers and the videos was not adequate. Moving forward, he has agreed to mark the performance area for 10-foot spacing, etc. Mr. Hanna also agreed that the performance area was not able to allow for social distancing when they had a group of 5 performers, and as a result, they did not intend to have entertainers with groups larger than 3 going forward. Fine, that's fantastic. But after that, there is more correspondence from Phil Laguerre and members of the Board of Health. Hi, Phil, one writes, I saw another video on Facebook where the performers are definitely not 10 feet apart. Did you hear anything back from the state yet? This is 2 weeks after the DLS's conversation that I just read. And Phil says, yes, it's on us to enforce. I emailed Sargon and Justin earlier this week. Next step is a warning letter, then cease and desist, then fine. I also stated that Facebook isn't helping their situation. So Phil writes out again to Sargon on the 19th, or I'm sorry, on the 11th. Now we're half a month away from that DLS conversation. Hello, hope you're both well, Phil writes. In recent communication with Michael Flanagan of DLS, he has confirmed that no games in the restaurant settings in or out are allowed. Your Facebook page shows trivia on Wednesdays. Also want to remind you that live entertainment needs to have 10-foot separation between musicians. Please advise, thanks. Again, I understand, more than anyone, I understand the difficulty of keeping up with some of these requirements. But the response here to me is a little bit troubling. The response is from Sargon is, hope all is well. Glad you still have a job during these difficult times, Phil. Again, not quite the response you would want to hear after a written warning was issued. Phil Aguirre, the day before that, writes to Michael Flanagan his concern about your particular issue. He writes to Michael Flanagan, he's talking about you guys. This one is in Grafton. And DLS had said what the next steps were. He said, I guess if that is the next step, this one is political for our local Board of Health, or due to 2 members and a former BOS member connected to the business. They're claiming we're harassing and picking on them, and we're not interpreting the law correctly. And Michael Flanagan simply writes back to him, the escalating enforcement steps are a verbal warning, written warning, then fines. It sounds like you've done the verbal warning. They should be issued a written warning. So the message there is best of luck with your problem. Again, you see the difficulty that we're in here. Nobody wants to come down on you. The Board of Health was looking for compliance. And there were some noise complaints in late August. It is what it is. I understand the difficulty there. You can't both be outside and be quiet at the same time, at least not in the same way that you were prior to COVID. I completely understand that. The problem then is it goes on, and the correspondence becomes heavier in the month of November. There's an issue with a fire oven that's not within our purview. There's an issue as the weather gets colder, the DLS having a problem with the stage and the tent separation. And DLS is trying to figure out if the tent is too close to the stage and if the people inside the tent are too close to the musicians. And eventually on November 2nd, a cease and desist order is issued. And that sort of appears to be the end of it, because now it's December. And obviously being outside isn't particularly practical. I'm glad to hear that the cease and desist order has been rescinded. The letter I got suggests that you guys had submitted a COVID-19 plan to DLS. I asked them for a copy of that, and I haven't gotten it. But one of the other problems that when I read these emails, one of the things that they're saying is DLS can't even get people out to see what's going on. So enforcement of all of these protocols that are designed to keep people safe is largely dependent upon whether or not there is adequate personnel to keep policing establishments. And so while I appreciate you, I appreciate your economic need for a license here, the question that falls to us under Chapter 183, and it's a very, very narrow question, Sean. The question is, number one, whether or not the license can be carried out in a way that does not impact health or safety hazards. But it's really a two-part question. Physically speaking, can you do it? I think you can. I don't know if you're going to do it in a way that you want to do it. That's number one. And number two, whether as a practical matter, this is actually going to happen. If we issue a license to you that requires compliance with COVID regulations, and they're ignored, as DLS and the Board of Health seem to believe that they were, according to the correspondence that I have, then why? I mean, you tell me, why would we go ahead and reissue an entertainment license before COVID abates? What we could do, I think, is say no, come back to us in April, and we would then take this up under our discretion as seen in Chapter 183. No application having been denied, as aforesaid, and no similar application thereto may be filed within 1 year of said denial, except in the discretion of the licensing authorities. I would imagine that everybody in this board would be more than happy to take this up if and when COVID numbers abate. But I guess, Sean, my concern is when I hear you say things like, we're unaware of any violations, and I've got a stack of correspondence from exasperated Board of Health members and Worcester Health Alliance members who are concerned not only about your ability to stay in business, about public safety and health, but also about being able to enforce something, being able to enforce this with political ramifications, which is really disturbing. And I know that's not on you. Those are their words, and that has nothing to do with you. But I want you to understand that this is the perspective that local health enforcement agencies in this community have with respect to your business. And I say that as respectfully as I possibly can. I want you to succeed. Everybody on this board wants you to succeed. I think the question is, given all of what I just read, whether or not in good conscience we can say yes. If we put restrictions on this license, they're absolutely going to comply, and we're not going to have to worry about this again. You know what I mean?
That, like you said, it's at your discretion. I don't have opinion about that. I'm aware of a warning in June and a cease and desist, and other than that, due process.
All right,
We would
thank
have
you.
paid a fine if we received it. My familiarity with this, and this is dealing with Wicked Twisted Pretzels, a Grafton business. We deal with the FDA and the State Board of Health and the Alliance. They do site visits. They cite us for infractions. They give us a warning. They give us a timeline to correct them. We correct them and are in compliance, or they fine us. I don't have any of that. So right now it's hearsay and subjective opinion, and we don't. That's not how laws work. That's not how they've ever worked. So I don't have anything to go by other than we've got a warning that we didn't receive any fines, and we've got a cease and desist that is no longer valid. It's been rescinded. So if we had fines that we were paying and multiple, I mean, the word fines is plural. There should be multiple fines, and nowhere does it say our license shouldn't be granted. So, and we checked with the state. The state said loss of license is not in the mandate. So we're dealing with the COVID mandate here. You're referencing the COVID mandate as well for health and safety, and yet all I've got is one paper warning and one cease and desist, both of which didn't result in any further steps. So if there's back and forth between the Board of Health and the state, and supposedly Sargon has a whole bunch of communications that I don't have in my possession, I don't have anything I can say about that other than I only understand due process, and this doesn't sound like due process.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Any other select board members want to go? Ms. Roy?
So I wrote my thoughts now because I didn't want to stumble, but Reunion seems to have a difficult time following the additional guidance and restrictions that came with having a music license during COVID. For example, a cease and desist was issued on November 2nd. On November 9th, one of the owners is online ignoring the cease and desist and performing anyway. Reunion is the only one who was issued a cease and desist in Grafton by the state regarding their music, and the cease and desist was rescinded yesterday. But there's still concerns I think that we need to address. I really like Reunion. I think it's a great place to go, but I don't want to be a part of the narrative where it appears they're receiving special treatment because of who the owners are, a former selectman and a current Board of Health member. It appears to me as though the Grafton Board of Health was put in a difficult position when it came to dealing with Reunion, specifically because an owner sits on the Board of Health. It seems to me that the Board of Health chose to involve a third party as often as possible to help deal with Reunion because Mr. Briggs is on the board and it's his business. This would escalate, so they would escalate their concerns to the Worcester Health Alliance and to the state to help deal with the numerous COVID-related complaints coming in against Reunion, which caused Reunion to feel as though they were being picked on, but to me it appears as though they were being given special consideration because an owner sits on the Board of Health. Not every restaurant in town was given the same special considerations when it came to their COVID complaints Reunion was given. Based on Reunion's actions the past 6 months, I'm not convinced that it's in the best interest of the public safety to renew Reunion's music license at this time. I am not convinced that they will be compliant based on their past behavior, but I would welcome Reunion's application in the future once the state has lifted all restrictions on indoor music. I think it would be more appropriate to renew their license at that time.
Thank you. Mr. Often.
Yeah, thanks. I also wrote down my thoughts. There was a lot of information that came through with regards to this. I do want to, I guess, reiterate that, Sean, if you guys want to continue this hearing, we should do that, because I do feel like we should give you the opportunity, if you'd like, to review all of the information. So I know that there was a lot of work that needed to go into producing the public records that you requested on behalf of the business. And so that opportunity is absolutely available. And if you guys want to do that, I think we should, because I don't know about the rest of the board members, but I spent a couple of days going through all of the information. It's a lot of volume of data when we look at the Board of Health and the Health Alliance and the Department of Labor standards, all of that communication going back and forth. For me, I guess I'll reiterate what Ed said in terms of how I'm thinking about this. And for me, this comes directly from advice from our general counsel, which says licensing authorities have discretion in this area. A denial of entertainment license requires a narrow finding based on legitimate public health or safety concerns. The suspension or revocation of any entertainment license must also have a compelling basis. So to me, that's sort of, as I was filtering through all this information, things like the noise complaints, they didn't rise to me to any level of public health or safety. So I sort of just disregarded those things, although there's a little bit of, there's something also in the law which allows you to consider whether the activity is actually going to increase the level of noise generated in the activity. But to me, my main concern really is around public health and safety. So the other thing says that is mentioned there is that the statute states that the licensing authorities shall grant a license unless they find that the license taken alone or in combination with other licensed activities would adversely affect the public health, safety, or order. So to me, that's sort of the heart of the matter here, and that's how I thought about these things. As I read through all this information, there was an email from the Health Alliance, which it was to the Health Alliance from the state, which says this was on June 12th, there's no indoor there's no entertainment allowed at all. So that's from the state to the Health Alliance. Then we have an email from Phil, who's with the Alliance, to our local Board of Health, mentioning that Tim would have a conversation with Sargon. So that was all happening. This was based on June 3rd and June 4th, we had posts from the Reunion Facebook page, which advertised outdoor seating and live music all day on the 8th. Now, this was before there was any legal entertainment allowed at all. Also, there was on the 4th, this is June 4th, about a week before the email from the state, on Reunion's Facebook page, which advertised trivia, which again is not allowed as far as entertainment goes. So I have some significant concerns about that. We don't know what those conversations with Sargon were, and I'd be very interested in hearing what those conversations actually were. But also, it's difficult for me to believe that nobody at Reunion would have been aware, aside from Sargon, with the nature of those conversations, and that they wouldn't have had a heads up that there were concerns that were being brought up and conversations that were being had. So then we have on July 1st, the warning from the Board of Health not to have live entertainment. That's on July 1st. On July 4th, just 3 days later, we have, again, posts on Reunion's own Facebook page with an entire day of live bands happening. And I don't understand the response to a warning from the local Board of Health to then just a couple of days later having a full day full of bands. We have then, everything that happened in November. We've got a cease and desist happening on the 2nd. Then again, we've got an email from the Health Alliance showing us the enclosed tent on the 4th. And then again, 4th, several posts with live music inside the tent. We have an email on November 9th, including Sargon, stating the requirements of 25 feet from the performance to the audience and 10 feet between the performers, with an indication that the plexiglass doesn't reduce that distance. he mentioned that that was across the board, anywhere in the state. Then we have that same day, a post on Reunion's Facebook page with Josh Briggs playing in the tent. I'm interested, Sean, in hearing from you as far as the November, and this all goes to kind of how are you guys actually interested in addressing these issues and complying with the directives in that cease and desist that came from the state. In the abatement section, it requests an email that go out to the Department of Labor Standards. I'm wondering if you guys replied to that and actually sent an email back to them that you guys were now in compliance with that, the conditions for that cease and desist.
I believe it states or a phone call, and we spoke to them that day. In my initial statement, I said the day we received the cease and desist, we called the department. And I believe it says in the statement to email or call, and we called and we spoke to.
Okay.
It seems, so again, I'm concerned with process. I do believe we have processes in place. For some reason, COVID mandates seems to have given Facebook the ability to be the place of record. So if we're going to mention that, I would say that every restaurant's Facebook page in Grafton, even one that has never had a license and you all knew, was doing the same thing. It's the same musicians. They would come here, they would play in the same manner as they would play at the other restaurants. That's on Facebook still. Go look. I don't understand.
Mr. Briggs, I'm going to interrupt you right there. Mr. Briggs, this is about Reunion Tap. This isn't about other restaurants. And if you want to talk about due process, if that's the case, then that's the select board's prerogative in which it will address, and they have their due process. So please don't violate that by mentioning them, please. Thank you.
So if it's okay, I'd like to continue. So we have an email on the 4th from Nancy Connors on the Board of Health. That notes that Tom Federico had issued 2 cease and desists, one for doing construction without a permit and the other for a tent with an expired permit. Was that tent permit ever renewed?
I'm sorry. Is this a hearing for a music license? What are we doing?
It is a hearing for a music license, but my concern is that we have issues that were forwarded to us in a series of emails that all concern public health. And those emails involve the Grafton Board of Health, they involve the Worcester Health Alliance, the State Department of Labor Standards, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and our building inspector. So, and this is just in the last few months. So that's, again, I'm coming to this from, as the permitting authority, I'm thinking about public health and safety. So to me, all of these things are relevant in terms of what's the behavior of the business in town.
We've spent tens of thousands of dollars separating tables, putting up plexiglass, making people wear masks, keeping people as safe as possible. We have 0 COVID cases traced back to us. We contact trace, we get people's names and phone numbers. We haven't had an issue here. The state has told us, you're not our problem. And again, all the documentation you're referring to, we have a process. We get warnings, we get fines, we are given time to correct. We're talking about a whole bunch of hearsay and speculation. I don't see any factual documentation, which the state and local authorities are all given the authority to do and are supposed to do. So where is it?
So I guess to just respond to that a little bit, nothing that I just mentioned is hearsay at all. Not 0 of it. These were all emails that were forwarded to us. These were posts by your own business on Facebook. These were pictures that were gotten by the Health Alliance or the local Board of Health. So none of this is any conjecture at all.
I'm unaware of Facebook being a record of fact for anything, legal or otherwise.
Well, I can tell you legally that if you're going to post pictures
Mr. Frisbee,
of violation,
ask for the floor, please. Mr. Often still had it. I'm sorry.
I'll yield. It's fine.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into semantics because it's beside the point. You know, our job here, again, is to make a determination under Chapter 183A as to your facility. And, you know, all I'm looking for, and again, I'll reiterate, it's pretty simple, is some sort of acknowledgement that there were missteps in the past where the rules and regulations were explained, and for whatever reason, they resulted in a cease and desist order on November 2nd. And we're not going to have to worry about that again, because as we've seen in Grafton, there are only so many resources to enforce the rules and regulations concerning distancing, and specifically with regard to musicians being 10 feet apart and 25 feet away from patrons. That was really the big issue. I mean, it's not about contact tracing. It's not about cases being traced back to you. The fact that there were 0 cases being traced back to you is fantastic, but it's not because of the musicians being closer than 10 feet apart. It's despite all that. That's lucky. And we want to maintain that string of good luck. In fact, good news today, there are 0 cases reported in Grafton. That's the first time since this summer that happened. As of a month ago, we were upwards of like 10 to 20 a day. And we want to keep it that way. And if you're going to say, look, we'll help you keep it that way by rigorous enforcement of these specific things relative to the entertainment license, about the tent and its distance from the building, about the musicians being 10 feet apart, and about the musicians being 25 feet away from the table nearest to them. And Sean, I'll tell you, I saw the pictures. You know, the musicians were camped out under the overhang, and the first table was halfway down a parking space. A parking space is what, 16, 17 feet. So that's 8 feet. So the patrons were maybe 10 feet away from the musicians, but the musicians were largely next to each other, and the patrons' first table was 10 feet away. And this was not something that happened earlier on. This was something that happened after DLS had spoken to you guys. And, you know, Sargon and Colleen and Matt are right. You know, there were posts which are tantamount to me to an admission that there is activity going on here that's violative of a cease and desist. And again, I'll put the question to you, and as respectfully as I can. If these things are documented and demonstrated, what reliance can we put on you that if we grant this license, we're not back here again in 4 months talking about the same thing?
Don't disagree with you. To clarify one thing, that first table on the other side of the plexiglass we reserved for the band members' families. So these are people that live together, don't wear masks together, come in and in the same car. We talked to the Alliance about that, and they said that was okay. So that was gone over. Secondly, we've had multiple conversations about limiting musicians to either husband and wife or roommates and duos, and not doing more bands. We currently are not doing any music at all anywhere, and certainly not inside, because we've never felt that safe to be safe. And we honestly don't plan on doing music again until it's nice out again and we can keep people far away. And I'd be more than willing to make sure that we are not putting 25 people within 25 feet of the musicians. And we do our best. We mentioned to everyone they're supposed to be wearing masks. Current HIPAA laws don't allow us to force people, and we can't ask them why they won't wear a mask, but we tell them, hey, the rule is you're supposed to wear a mask. And they're like, we play together, we live together. I said, well, that's your prerogative. And we were told by the state if that was what they wanted to do, they were allowed to do that. We never forced any strangers to stand next to each other and breathe on each other that didn't want to be there. These were people that were rehearsing together, playing at the other restaurants in town in the same manner. There are pictures posted of them playing in the exact same format and setup next to each other. So we didn't feel we were doing anything different or breaking any rules. And we're not trying to get anyone sick. We certainly can't afford it. We don't have enough staff to close down. So
I appreciate that. If I'm hearing you correctly, does it make sense to revisit the music license issue in April when it starts getting nicer out?
Again, that's your prerogative. I don't even think we're going to need one till then, but it would be nice to know the first day it was available, we'd be able to. But I don't have a say. I mean, license were up for renewal at the last meeting. We got asked to come to the hearing. We're here. We prefer to have our license. So if that's what you guys decide, we don't have a say in it. I mean, we're not going to use it till it's available for us anyways.
Thank you. Mr. Austin?
Yeah, Sean, thanks so much for coming. This was really helpful to get, some more context to the conversation. Would it help you guys to get a license for the trivia? I know that that's something that you guys do regularly.
I mean, certainly, the trivia is, it's a touch-free thing. It's one person sitting at a table talking in a microphone. There's no table touching. There's no mingling. There's no nothing. It's like someone reading a book in the corner. It doesn't create any. It creates less contact than a server, and we don't even have servers. Ours is completely touch-free. Everything's takeout. The customers don't get in the face of a server. They're handed their product. It goes in the trash afterwards. We're not collecting dirty dishes. The trivia does not create any contact with any customers.
All right, Ms. Roy?
So does this license depend on, or do you need trivia? Do you need this license to do trivia, I guess is my question, because the license, the way it's written is to be conducted acoustic music. It doesn't say anywhere about trivia. So even if this doesn't get renewed until later when you can use it, would you still be able to continue to do trivia?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm unaware of anyone having a license that states trivia in town, and I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the answer to that is no. I think one of the reasons trivia came up was because DLS or the state didn't want people coming to restaurants and staying. They want them to come, they want them to eat, and they want them to go. Trivia incentivizes people to stay. So I think that's where the trivia part came into it. I think the only thing that we're really concerned with here is, yeah, the only thing we're really concerned with here is.
Never gone longer than 90 minutes.
Right.
Anyone else? Oh, Ms. Roy?
I guess I'm still confused because the license I'm looking at doesn't appear to grant trivia. So even if we did give you this tonight, are you allowed to do trivia?
Ms. Roy, I think the current restrictions that the state has imposed is that there is no entertainment at any eating establishment, I think due to the level that we're at. And when the governor rolled back restrictions, I think a few weeks ago, and again, I'm summarizing a lot of technical information that was conveyed at a moment's notice to all the business owners. So I think that at this point in time, there is no entertainment to be done or held in any of the restaurants until further notice.
I fully agree with you, but let's wave a magic wand and COVID goes away tomorrow and this license gets granted and everything kumbaya. It's only for acoustic music. So does he need an additional license for trivia, or do you not need a license for trivia? Because this is a music license. Okay, so that's perfect. So you can continue on with trivia as long as the state says it's okay, regardless of what happens with this license, is what I just wanted to confirm.
That's my belief.
That's my understanding too, Ms. Roy. All right, so thank you for everyone. I just wanted to say a couple of my comments. Yes, I reached out to Mr. Briggs last week after we received the public records request on or about December 22nd, about 2:52 p.m. And conferring, with council, I reached out to Mr. Briggs and asked him if he felt that, he needed some time, to receive the request that was submitted and to review all of the information. And we're here tonight. So I figure that, I don't see a reason for continuing this hearing at this time, unless I can be convinced otherwise by the board. But a couple of comments that I would like to make in regards to reunion. I love the idea of outdoor music. I think that, this town should really take a hard look at the way that these licenses are structured to allow it. The way that I'm reading our license today is that, and I had Ms. Roy read actually the license for tab table 198, was when it describes the description of the premise of where acoustic music will occur is in approximately a 5,000 square foot freestanding building consisting of one floor and basement, first floor full service restaurant bar area with approximately seating for 200 patrons. Nowhere in this license does it say that it permits for outdoor live entertainment, whether it be acoustic, duets, multiple members of a band, whether they're amplified or not. I do feel that, and just my inclination is that renewing the license and codifying that specific component right there does not entitle this license to perform outdoors. And I will say this, that I would like to see our town employees and staff and business owners to perhaps come up with what they think is a reasonable approach to licensing live entertainment outside of their premise, people who do hold this type of licensure. I believe it's fair. I believe that it gives the public an opportunity to know that, hey, outside of the typical street traffic and everything going on, that, hey, there could be some live music that you're going to hear for a certain period of time. I think that going forward with this, that if, this license holder or any license holder for that matter, were to violate the existing music license, then I would, consider going right to option 9 under the Chapter 299 Acts of 1926, and hold a hearing and have a discussion about why they don't have proper licensures and permission to perform outdoors. I do think it's a great idea. I think done right, I think it's fantastic. I think it provides a bit of relief to a very stressful time. I'm not going to lie to you. I think it's a good idea. But I do believe that we have an obligation when we look at this to read the letter in which it was prescribed and stick with it. If we renew this license tonight with the codifying what the description of the premises is and restating that, then the only place where Reunion or anybody who has a similar license can only perform indoors. And that I would say that between now and April 1st, I believe that when we can have more people maybe going outside and when tents are safe to go back up, that won't collapse under a snow load and so on and so forth, or you won't be freezing to death, right, being outside. I would like us to come up with a process to offer amendments to those with these types of music licenses, and then have some sort of stipulations that allows for outdoor music. That way there is clear guidance, there's no ambiguity, everyone is on the same playing page. Everyone is aware of what the rules are going forward. And if, like I said, if that becomes a problem, then this board or any future board for that matter of fact can hold a hearing and discuss what's going on, and has the authority to revoke it if they feel that that is not being followed to the letter of what was agreed. I want to hear some assurances, from Mr. Briggs and, co-owner of Tap and Table, that they're going to abide, by the license as it's written, that that no outdoor music would be permitted until such time that the town has a process in which to allow it. And I hope that that is, something that maybe that can be a priority for the board, and take up and have done within the next couple of months. I don't think it needs to be rocket science, I'll be honest with you, but there should be something that's on the record that states, where they'll be performing, how long, and so on and so forth. So the public has an opportunity to know, that this is what's going to happen going forward. And I will ask you that, Mr. Briggs. I mean, you want a renewal, you want to renew the music license. To the letter of this, and it doesn't say anywhere from the state guidelines about having to serve outdoor, serving alcohol or food or so on and so forth, that you can take your music license and go outside. But I want to hear from you tonight some strict assurances that we have that from you, that we hope that we, what assurances are you going to give us to make sure that we don't have the state come back with a verbal warning and a cease and desist? And I want to hear that from you tonight, I think, before we close this hearing.
Sure. Thank you, Pete. First, I want to say I completely agree with you. I think there were assumptions made not just by us, not just by local Grafton restaurants, but I believe by the entire state and most of the country, when local governments pushed everyone outside and then made those last-minute alcohol and gathering rules changed as well and said, let's go. I think everyone kind of took their entertainment license with them, and it's not just us, it's all over the country. There is an assumption there. And I agree. Our license states inside. We have never played one note of music outside of this building pre-COVID. We've had entertainment inside for the last 2 years. There's never been any complaints of any sort. And we had no plans to go outside until we were forced out there. And we were trying to do as best we could. I assure you, we will try to adhere to COVID rules. And my guess would be the next time it's even possible to do music outside, there will be much more clear guidelines and less ambiguity. And we're certainly all for that, following those rules. And I love the idea of coming up with some regulations. Do we need an noise ordinance? Maybe we do. We followed the Worcester one as good neighbors. We didn't go past 9 o'clock. We had people sitting outside at the tables. They could speak while the bands were playing. You could have a conversation. Kids were there. It wasn't, no one needed earplugs. You know, we didn't get any complaints from across the street. There's a bunch of condos over there. The traffic is often louder than the music. Maybe 1 or 2 nights on our anniversary, we might have been a little bit louder, and I apologize, and we did turn the music down. But it wasn't we're out to get the neighborhood. That's not what our intention was, never is. And I'm all for it. So yeah, I think it would be great if we could come up with some outdoor regulations. Because like you said, even if we reinstate this license tonight, it doesn't state we can be outside. And I don't think anyone's license in town says that.
Thank you for that assurance, Mr. Briggs. Appreciate your response. Ms. Roy.
So I haven't really seen the license before today. Today was the first time seeing it. And something that struck me as interesting is that you're only supposed to be doing the live music on weekdays between like noon and midnight, pretty much noon and 1 or noon and 2. Pre-COVID, you guys weren't really following that either. You definitely had music on the weekends. I went to a Sunday jazz brunch. I loved it. It was great and highly recommend it. But I don't know if we should also change the wording on this to incorporate, or why weekends were left out to begin with.
I think, doesn't it say weekends until 2 a.m.? I
No.
think it says Monday.
Just Friday. It doesn't say anything about weekends.
Oh, that's Saturday, Sunday.
I would say this, Mr. Briggs. Ms. Roy, I mean, you do bring up some points tonight about what's on the license, and there may be just a typo that is carried over for years, because I agree that to me seems to be like, yeah, that should be there. But I would agree that we should take a thorough review of the music licenses today, and make sure that not only Reunion Tavern Tables is consistent, but all the other ones are as well. And if they are not, then we rectify that whatever means necessary by the power of the boards. It has really nothing to do specifically with Reunion's issue tonight, but you do bring up a good point about that statement there before the signature. Does anyone have anything else that they wish to say? Mr. Brisby.
So yeah, I don't know if you want to do this now or save this for the discussion on the vote to either renew it or not. But it's been kind of been brought up a second ago, and that is the noise issue. The reason why this says indoor and there's an allowance for outdoor music is because of COVID. Sooner or later, the COVID restrictions and protocols are going to go away. So we're not going to have to worry about any of this, but there's also not going to be any outdoor music. So we're not going to have to worry about that part. Probably what we ought to do is address, within this particular entertainment license, so long as music is going to be allowed outside, that there be hours attached to that. And I don't know if you want to have that discussion now or later.
Well, if I may, Mr. Brisby, the hours of operation are stipulated by the state, and if I'm not
No. We're talking about hours for music specifically outside.
COVID related or non-COVID related.
Nope. Anytime there's outside music.
And I think that is something that we should come up with. Again, it's not in here. This is about indoors, to your point.
You can, under the statute, you can prescribe reasonable restrictions on entertainment, such as time and place and manner. I mean, if we wanted to, and I don't want to, but for instance, I've seen these things where they get into the type of instrument used. Acoustic guitar, 6-string versus 12, light piano, violin. I don't care. I really don't care, but I've seen communities get into that.
Yeah. That wasn't my intention, Mr. Prisby, but I mean, that you do bring up a point. And again, I think that's something we can discuss when we take this matter up as the next agenda item once we conclude this hearing. Does anyone else have any comments for this hearing? Mr. Often.
Thank you. Yeah, if we were going to introduce something like, you know, outdoor music hours, I would want to make sure that we were doing that pretty much across the board to anybody who had that type of license. So, you know, one of the things that we need to make sure that we're doing in terms of these licenses and dealing with the businesses is to make sure that we're creating a level playing field. What I don't want to do and what I would hate to do is put any restrictions that would unfairly penalize Reunion and provide an anti-competitive situation for them. So I guess if we're going to do that, I'd like to revisit all of the licenses and think about doing that.
Thank you.
That's reasonable, Mr. Alston. Okay. Anyone else have any comments? Or we can take a motion to close the hearing. All right, Mr. Briggs, thank you very much for coming out tonight. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I move we close the hearing.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on closing the hearing? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Prisby,
Yeah,
Mr. Alston,
Alton, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried, closing the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Briggs, for coming out tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on our agenda item tonight is we have action item here regarding Tap and Table 198 LLC, DBA Reunion Tap and Table Entertainment License. Given the hearing we heard from Mr. Briggs tonight and the members of the board, is there any discussion that the board would like to do or direction that they want to go in tonight? Mr. Prisby.
so as I see it, we have four options. We can say yes in its entirety. We can say yes with restrictions. We can say no, come back and see us later, or we can say no. I am somewhere in between the two middle options, and I can be convinced either way. What I did hear that was encouraging, I think, was at least a recognition that, look, we don't want to, obviously don't want to make anybody sick, and they want to abide by Grafton regulations, and not Grafton regulations, but the state regulations concerning COVID. What I didn't hear, which was conspicuously absent, was an admission, yeah, we screwed up. Here's how we're going to change that. There was some miscommunication. I mean, if you're taking Sean at his word, there was either miscommunication or lack of communication between the principals of Reunion concerning conversations had with DLS. There was a lack of communication or a lack of awareness about what was being posted on their own Facebook page. And therefore a lack of communication, a lack of awareness about what activities were actually being conducted that might have violated a cease and desist order. What I do know also from the communication and correspondence that we had from the Health Alliance and DLS is there's only so many places that DLS can be with their strike force. And so I take Mr. Briggs at his word when he says the state told them they're not the focal point. I'm sure that that's true. Grafton's one little town, and this is one little business in one little town. I'm sure that Reunion isn't the state's focal point. Unfortunately, because of the history here, they're now ours. So I'm not sure I heard enough tonight to have me say yes, unless it's a yes, come back in April, or no, come back in April. I would be interested in hearing what you all think would appropriate restrictions would be, with the understanding that there frankly already were restrictions on this license under number 9. We could spell them out and be very specific about the tables and the distancing and the trivia and all of that. But at the end of the day, the onus is on this board when we find violations to call them in here. And if we're being honest with each other, I think we all knew that there were potential violations back in August, and we didn't do anything. We just sort of hoped it would work out. And, now here we are talking about it. So I don't know.
Anyone want to go? Mr. Alston.
Yeah, I guess in terms of August, we were going in and out of Board of Health meetings. I think we were, somewhat aware of some of what was going on, but at the end of the day, the enforcement is with the Health Alliance, the state, and the Board of Health. That's not really up to us. in the same vein, it's not up to us to enforce noise complaints, right? Those go to the police and they show up on, at the noise complaint, and they talk to the people that are on site at the time and address those as they come. So I'm not sure necessarily that there was a whole lot more for us to do necessarily. I'm glad we had this conversation, and I'm really I'm glad that we got the level of information that we did. For myself, I feel a little bit more comfortable now hearing conversations about, look, yes, we had band members that were not distanced, but we had discussions with them. They were family members or were, in the same household. And we had reserved that table, that front table that everybody was so concerned about for family members. That to me is a little bit of a, it changes the game for me a little bit in terms of how I think about it.
There's just one thing I do want to mention, and people keep bringing it up, and I think it's important to mention this. The law works on parallel tracks sometimes, and there are different overlapping authorities. Sure, the Board of Health is charged with enforcing these COVID violations. The police are in charge. We should actually flush this out a little bit sometime with noise complaints. But we do have authority over this entertainment license. If there are repeat violations of noise, if there are repeat violations of health and safety, we do have it within our authority to yank an entertainment license regardless of what the Board of Health is doing about health violations and regardless of what the police are doing about noise violations. So it is important for people to understand we're not overstepping our bounds. We're not trying to supersede something that the Board of Health or the Worcester Health Alliance did or did not do. The entertainment license is strictly by statute within our purview as the licensor. So, I'm with you. Like I heard some things that were good. I'm not sure I heard a general acknowledgement that we're not going to be back here, because if we don't view this as the licensing authority, as something that's within our purview, then I'm a definite no until April. The only way I would put conditions on this is if we were going to enforce conditions.
All right, anyone else? Just Roy?
I guess given those 4 options for me, it would be no and come back. And part of that is because the enforcement agent is the Board of Health, and one of the owners of Reunion sits on the Board of Health, and they still struggled immensely to be compliant. I don't think it's a no one forever though. Just no one come back when this won't get you into trouble. I just don't want to see them have any more issues because I like the place.
All right, Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of renewing with restrictions. I think, the state guidance is there already with those restrictions already outlined. So to me, to reiterate what the concerns were based on the current state guidelines just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't know if it makes sense for us to just say come back later either, because they can't do any entertainment currently. So what would the date be that we would tell them to come back? Because I would want them to, when entertainment is available, to start entertaining. So I'm not sure where that leaves us if we were to say, come back at the end of March. I'm not sure what the purpose of that would be, I guess. So Colleen, I'd be interested, if you're okay, to just understand why we would do that.
For me personally, it's because they're just having so many issues with holding this music license, and the additional COVID restrictions and guidance were just such stumbling blocks for them. And then it created more of a muddy situation, given the fact, again, that there is a owner on the Board of Health, the enforcement agent, who they all tripped over themselves on how do I enforce this? What do I do? This is very uncomfortable. So they kept bringing in a third party, and it it blew up to what it didn't need to be. And seeing how they can't use it at all anyway, it won't affect trivia for them. It's just get rid of the problem. You know, why hand them something back that has only been causing them problems? Come back when the state lifts all the guidelines. That's the date I would set, is when the state lifts the guidelines, hand that in and we'll approve it right away. There'd be no reason not to at that point.
I may add, I want to answer a question earlier that Mr. Prisby proposed. To answer your question earlier, I didn't hear an apology. I wasn't really asking for one. I really wanted to get an explanation tonight and just their side of the story. They got a verbal warning and a cease and desist from the state. Okay, so they got that. I do believe that this board, going forward, should be taking, its role more judiciously, I think, going onward, and setting up a precedent that anyone holding these licenses knows that, here are the conditions that are outlined within your license. And that number 9, it says that, hey, if we find that there's any non-compliance, and non-compliance is very broad, it's open. It's not saying if you're not complying with one thing, it's non-compliance with any of the laws of this Commonwealth relating to a particular establishment, and may, after a hearing, be revoked. I feel that, renewing it today as is, and knowing that if anything is violated, if we see more than 2 people performing within 10 feet of each other, and we have an exhibit that proves that, then I'm willing to let them know that you will be in here at our next available meeting for a hearing, and we're going to discuss it. And then, to your point, Ms. Roy, they're put on, everyone's put on notice, especially them. It is my sincere hope that, if this board does, in its wisdom tonight, renew the license as is, in codifying, the description of premise of where they can perform live music. I do feel that, I do feel that, it's similar to like when someone gets caught for selling to an underage thing, when the police go out and do their things on a regular basis with the ABCC, first-time offenders, they get, hey, that's your last warning. After that, we start revoking your license. But you see, they're put on notice after the first time they get caught. And to that point, we have a documented, situation with them where they received a cease and desist for doing exactly what's been talked about, I think, since early this summer. And I feel that going forward, we treat it just like we would treat anything else. And that's sort of historically what this board has done. But I think, and this is the first time we're talking about music, usually it's about alcohol. I say we go forward and renew it, knowing that, this and every other music license holder is going to be, we're going to adhere to the rules. And if there's non-compliance, then we take that next step instead of restricting it. To your point, Mr. Often, I would agree with you that, we should allow them to perform when that time becomes available. They shouldn't be restricted, but I'll be honest with you, I don't want to see it outside. I don't want to see them performing with a tarp up outside in their patio, thinking that, they're not considering that outside. It needs to, anything outside of that 5,000 square foot premise and those walls in that first floor, to me, is not adhering to the license. But I don't want to put in a restriction that says, let's say, March 31st or March 15th, they can start having live music again with the state's guidelines. Well, if they're not following the state's guidelines, then I say we go back and look at number 9 and say, all right, we find that you're not doing that. And we discuss it with them. And then we take any action, and then we can revoke their license for a period of time if that becomes necessary. So I guess that's where I'm at right now. Again, I know this is kind of separate and there should be another topic for a future agenda item, but I really do want to look at just outdoor music licenses in general for these establishments. I'll personally say I think they're onto something. I think this is great for the community. I think that this is something that we should consider and codify going forward. That's how I feel. Mr. Prisby.
I guess the question to you guys, did anybody hear anything that would suggest that were the license to be renewed, that what happened in November after the cease and desist was issued would not happen again in January and February?
Mr. Prisby, I didn't ask that question. I don't know if anyone else
No,
wants
but
to.
did you hear anything that was suggested?
Yeah,
I mean, we went through a volume of correspondence in which at least one or two of the owners were unapologetic, to say the least, about repeated violations. And what I did not hear was, sorry about that, I'll talk to them. I heard conjecture and hearsay. Toward the end of the conversation, the tone got a little bit better, but I think that's because our tone got a little bit better. And, you know, we want to be reasonable people here. But there is nothing that I heard to suggest to me that what we just went through isn't going to be what we're going to go through if we renew the license. And it's all well and good to say, we're going to call them back in here and we'll get them this time. Sure. We didn't before. If I'm another business owner in Grafton, I'm looking at this going, what a joke. I did my part to adhere. 2 members of the Board of Health and a former member of the Board of Selectmen didn't. And these guys are saying, well, okay. You know?
Yeah, Mr. Prisby, I guess the way I feel about that is I can't worry about what other people feel about this or what their perceptions are. I think I can only look at what's going forward. And going forward, I think every license holder should be held accountable to the same rigor and standards that is outlined in front of us tonight. Going forward, I think that's why I said this board needs to be more judicious. Should we have done this back in the early summer? Okay, maybe, but we didn't. We didn't do that. We're very lenient or ignorant to the fact that it benefited some companies and it didn't others, because some organizations that had live music, did adhere to the regulations and kept people 25 feet away, so on and so forth. I get that point, but I want to look at going forward. I really don't care about how the other ones felt, going from today. Mr. Alton.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to, Colleen tickled my brain a little bit and made me think about enforcement and kind of our positioning in this situation. It was clear to me in reading through all the email correspondence that, and Mr. Prisby, I think you brought it up in one of the emails, that the Health Alliance correctly kind of called out the fact that this is a fairly political situation for them, and also for the Board of Health. So I guess to just throw it out there, potentially a reason for us to not renew at this point, or to put in a restriction to say, when COVID opens up, then you can go ahead and do that, is to say, we're concerned, I guess, about the enforcement mechanism because it is so political. So until we deal with that situation, and we can have kind of a more clean enforcement mechanism, and or COVID is over, there's something to be said for us not moving forward with it. Because to answer your question, Ed, I didn't hear a lot of, a lot that would make me feel confident, I guess, that they're not going to continue aggressively pursuing, right, any possible opportunity. And when challenged or those discussions happen, that communication, I guess, within the business owners, it seems like it's fairly loose, and there are these different points of communication to the various town, local and state bodies that aren't very well coordinated. So I don't know. I didn't hear much in terms of making me feel better that they were going to be changing their position going forward in terms of that. I don't know.
Mr. Prisby.
I think the one thing I would want to be careful of is I want to stay away from the idea that, we would come down on them because we can't enforce our own laws. Like, that's our problem. That's not their problem. But our problem really is, it's a health and a safety concern. And again, I just keep coming back to this one thing. Part of the reason you have laws and punishments is to dissuade not only bad actors from acting that way, but would-be bad actors from acting that way. A $300 fine isn't going to keep anybody from doing anything. It's a slap on the wrist. It's it's one good waiter's tips for a night. But if you consistently enforce our ability to regulate entertainment licenses so that we are maximizing efficiency in what people are able to do by spelling it out for them and then revoking them or amending them as need be when people violate them, then everybody's working under the same rules and regulations and everybody's on the same page. I think the problem here is, there's a desire to grant this because we like this business, and it's a good one with people we know and otherwise like. But the problem is, I didn't hear anything beyond platitudes that would lead me to believe that they understand what happened in June, in August, and in November was a mistake, and that it cannot happen again. And I do believe, people are watching local government and how it responds to these things to see if it's being fair and even-handed. And, Sean was talking about his brand. Our brand's at play here too. Our ability to render a decision based on the law and be fair and consistent is being watched. And people hate this stuff. People hate us putting our big fat noses where they don't belong in operating other people's businesses. And to be honest, I don't like being here any more than they want me to be here. But this is where we are. And the statute says health and safety. And I'm looking at health and safety violations that were dismissed as hearsay. So I can't in good conscience just say, yes, better luck next time. I either want to say, no, come back to us when the restrictions are lifted, or something more creative on the license, which says no for anything under phase 4, no for anything under phase 3.2, until such a time. I need something more here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anybody else? So, Mr. Prisby, on your last statement there, you need something more. It sounds like there may be some additional language or provisions within the licensure that you want to seek. Is it, their license expires on the 31st, and I know I have Ms. Kramer here, and I know, the dates and everything in which things occur have implications. So if we were to push this out for the 5th at our next business meeting, and maybe one of us comes up with, or one of you comes up with some language that you want this board to consider, then their license technically, it actually expires after the 31st. So they're going into the 5th with actually no license. And then what's our course of action? So, Ms. Kramer, just some guidance on that. If the board needs some time to look at some additional language to craft within this, what happens to, can we just say, due to the timing, we understanding that, this doesn't mean your license is, revoked at this time. It's just in an uncertain status until January 5th. I mean, what's your take?
That's fine. There's no problem with doing that. You have 35 days following today to either grant the license or deliver to the applicant a written notice denying the license and stating the reasons for the denial. But in granting the license, you have the authority to condition it as, to condition it. But I mean, that doesn't mean you can say this license is valid starting April 1st or something like that. You can make reasonable conditions, but the statutory period for the license goes from when the license is approved to the December 31st. You can't alter the dates that it's, it's enforced, but you can certainly take until the 5th to craft language regarding conditions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alton?
Is a reasonable condition the phase of COVID that we're in?
Well, I mean, that's unknown and unknowable, but I think that, my advice would be to steer away from COVID phases, because that's, something that could change and is not within this board's control. But you could, I'm thinking more of time, place, and manner restrictions that would be more traditional. I wouldn't necessarily go out on a limb and institute conditions related to something that has never happened before for all intents and purposes, because it's just unclear how that would be viewed.
Thank you. Ms. Roy?
I'm prepared to make a motion if you'll allow that.
I'll allow 1 second, but I just want to say before you make a motion, Ms. Roy, I'm in favor of waiting until the 5th. To Mr. Prisby's point, if there's some additional language, or unless you have that tonight, Ms. Roy, that, maybe that meets. I'm not trying to put the whole decision on you,
Nope,
Mr. Prisby, but I want to give an opportunity to all the members to consider that as well. But if you want to make your motion, it doesn't have to be seconded, or it can be seconded. We can discuss it and we can take action.
Sounds good. I move the board postpone renewing Reunion's Tap and Tables music license until after the state lifts music-related restrictions.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Can I just say something?
We're going to go into discussion right now, Ms. Kramer. I have a motion made and seconded. Ms. Kramer, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I don't think that you can do that. The statute requires that you approve the license within 45 days of receiving the application. And if you want a hearing to get more information from the licensee, which is what this is, then you have to, within 30 days of that hearing, either allow the license, you can condition it, or deny it. So I don't think you can do that without inviting some exposure to the town.
So, Ms. Kramer, based on the technical condition that Ms. Roy mentioned in her motion, is that a condition that can be decided by this board?
Until the state lifts COVID-related restrictions with respect to licensing? I mean, entertainment?
Yes.
Well, as I said, I mean, that the answer to that question is unknowable, because the way that, lawyers know that things are, are allowable is because it's happened before and the courts have said that's allowable. So, this hasn't been reviewed. So I think that it is correct that there are several tracks that, just because the Board of Health has, is one authority that oversees some of these activities, that doesn't mean that, that this board can't also, require as part of its entertainment license that all, state laws, regulations, executive orders, et cetera, are being complied with. I mean, you can make that a condition of your license, but I wouldn't specifically tie, any particular state orders, because they're, the state orders we're dealing with here are extraordinary and they could change at any time. So, you don't, it's hard, I guess you could incorporate it, as amended, but I just think that, what you're really talking about is you want to make sure that all state laws, regulations, and orders are being complied with. And as long as they are, that's a condition of your license. I think that would be the most.
That's what I was referring to. So, I mean, in essence, if this is renewed tonight and right now the state has a restriction in place, that's already in place without us having to put that as a condition, because, per the rules, at the licensee must comply with any or all laws of the Commonwealth referring to this, particular establishment. Right. All right. Thank you, Ms. Roy.
So going along with what Ms. Kramer is saying is that part of the license says they have to comply, and we have a long history of proving that they are not. And I'll just go back to the cease and desist on November 2nd, and then on November 9th, in addition to several other posts. But one of the owners, the Board of Health member, was sitting there violating that cease and desist singing, and they were telling him not to do that. I reached out to the Department of Labor Standards, as Mr. Briggs recommended we do, and they didn't give me the same response that they gave him. They were saying it was still in at that time, because it was December 15th or 16th, it was still in place. So to me, they aren't really showing that they're going to stay within compliance, and that creates a safety issue for me. And I think that's why I don't want to say no forever, though. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to deny them tonight and have this create this whole issue of never again. I just don't think they should have it right now while COVID's an issue, because it's an issue for them.
Mr. Hoffman.
Sure. So what would the option look like for us to ask them to come back? Let's say end of March.
I mean, I think you're going out on a limb if you do that, because this is, you know, a hearing to request further additional information, and the statute gives you two choices for the action you can take. You know, and that one of those choices doesn't come back in 3 months. So
that's not necessarily true though, Ginny, because what we can do is we can say no, and we have to give a list of reasons. We can list out the reasons that Colleen just went through, and I've gone through, and Matt's gone through, and say we would reconsider this application at a later date. And that would be under the statute within our purview to do that.
I believe that, I'm trying to find it here. In order to preserve and protect the public health, safety, and order, the licensing authorities may place conditions on the license and promulgate rules and regulations. I'm pretty sure. I'm just trying to look and if it's issuance or just revocation. That once that happens, they can't come back for at least a year.
So it's this paragraph, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraph down in the statute. Within 30 days next following the final date of such opportunity for hearing, the licensing authority shall A, grant the license, or B, deliver to the applicant written notice denying the license and stating in writing the reasons for such denial. And the interesting sentence is, no application having been denied as aforesaid, and no similar application thereto may be filed within 1 year of date of said denial, except in the discretion of the licensing authorities. So in other words, if we can deny it for good reasons, and the reasons are set forth in the next following paragraph for health and safety, but then say in our reasons, feel free to come back, but at that point, it's no longer a rebuttable presumption you're getting this, it's within our discretion as a licensing authority.
Yeah, the way I read that would be, you have discretion to entertain a license application notwithstanding your denial.
Right.
That doesn't change the standard of the statute for acting on an application.
Yeah, but they can still, so they can still come back is my thing. So if they wanted to come back in March and say, okay, we've read your reasons, you know, the weather's getting nice, here's what we've done in the meantime to improve communication between the senior partners of this business to ensure that we're not going to run into the same issues that we ran into before. Will you consider it now? That would be okay. I think what we had suggested a couple minutes ago was just writing up something in the alternative, granting it now, and writing up something in the restrictions on the license to babysit, in lack of a better word, to really affect what we want to see happen here, which is we're not going to see people on Facebook singing in the face of cease and desist orders, and that we're not going to see people too close together. We're not going to see tables too close together. And we have it within our authority under this to say, okay, the state, you know, suppose the state moves back to phase 2, allowing, you know, certain amounts of people in restaurants at a given time. I think it's within our authority to say, okay, for this particular restaurant, because of the lack of adherence to regulations previously, you're sort of on a different track here. You're on phase 4, when numbers are below a certain place, we're going to trust you to open again. Maybe that's too complicated, but I think it's something that's worth talking about, because I'm just, again, not comfortable enough to say, yep, go ahead. I totally trust that we're not going to run into these issues again. And I think Sean was forthcoming tonight. I just, there were other conversations and other parties involved that, I was less than comfortable with.
All right, so we still have a motion made and seconded by Ms. Roy with these conditions and understanding the ramifications of this. Does the board still wish to deliberate the motion and its merits, or does it, people who had seconded and made the motion want to rescind it, or do we want to take a vote right now on it?
I'm okay with taking a vote.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Ms. Roy, will you read the motion one more time, please?
I move the board postpone renewing Reunion Tap and Table's music license until after the state lifts music-related restrictions.
A little discussion on that. I don't think we can do that either.
So, yeah, I'm happy to vote on it, but I'm going to vote nay on the basis that I don't think we can actually do that.
So should we just amend it a different way to word it?
Let's make it, Ms. Roy, let's make it clean. Let's, I will entertain if the person who seconded and made the motion want to rescind the motion, or we can take a vote to deny it, and then we can take another vote if the board wishes, or wait till January 5th.
I'll rescind it, but I don't want to wait until January 5th. I want to take action tonight because I think it gets muddy if we go past their expiration date.
I will also rescind.
So I have the person who seconded to rescind, the person who made the motion to rescind. Okay. Per my authority, I will rescind the motion for that. Okay. All right. Is there any action that the board are wanting to take tonight with regards to Reunion Tap and Table's music license? Ms. Roy.
I move the board vote to deny renewing Reunion Tap and Table's music license at this time.
I have a motion to deny renewal at this time. Do I have a second?
Okay.
All right, I don't have a second. As chair, I'm going to second the motion just so we can have discussion on it and then take action. All right. Mr. Terenzini, discussion on the motion by Ms. Roy to deny the music license at this time.
Whether it's included in this motion or someone is authorized to draft the letter, I just do remind the board that it must advise the applicant of the reasons for the denial.
Okay, Ms. Roy?
So one of the reasons I would list too was in that a bunch of documentation we were given, the Alliance, there's an email between the Alliance and Mr. McInerney, and one of the sentences they used was, I recommend that no live entertainment permits be issued at this time. That was back in June, and based on and that wasn't really up for discussion then, but their behavior between June and now just kind of indicated to me that it's hurting them more than it's helping them. It's just getting them into trouble.
All right, within the discussion of the motion, Ms. Roy made mention of correspondence between the Health Alliance and Mr. McInerney. Mr. Austin.
Yeah, I'm just interested, what does our reasoning need to look like? So I don't want to just vote no unless we've agreed on what our reasoning looks like and how that's all going to go, because that's part of the process.
Is that a question to the board? Is that a question to Ms. Kramer or Mr. Terenzini?
It's to Ms. Kramer.
Well, it says that you can grant the license or deliver to the applicant written notice denying the license and stating in writing the reasons for such denial. So what you could do, and I defer to Mr. Terenzini, but what you could do is, task somebody with coming up with a letter, vote to deny the license, and then task somebody coming up for a letter that you can then vote on, or not vote to deny the license, but, task somebody and then you can vote on that at your January meeting. make sure that, you know, the board is comfortable with the reasons stated.
Ms. Kramer, how long do we have to submit that letter for denial? Once the
30 days from today.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Frisbee.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was on more of the renew with guidelines track, you know, and I understand what Colleen's saying. Last June, we were also in a place with COVID numbers where there was no live entertainment, and still it happened. And it would be, again, it would be one thing if it just happened, and that was last June, but this sort of thing kept happening. And now we're sort of in the same place with the COVID numbers. Today's good news notwithstanding. At 550 cases, 11 deaths that we know about. Yeah, I'm open to be convinced. Maybe that is the path. Maybe the path is, you know, we are meticulous in stating what our reasons are based on past behavior and based on the present situation, and that it makes sense for them to reapply as COVID-related conditions permit, or yeah, something to that effect. We have a month to figure that out. I suspect that it's 6 of one thing, half a dozen of another, because it's the winter time, and they're probably not going to make use of this entertainment license anyway. I guess I would caution that optics are a thing when it comes to local government and overstepping. And if it's half a dozen of one, 6 of another, then maybe we think about, you know, what are we doing, and how business friendly or unfriendly do we want to come off seeming if we don't have to. That's another thing.
Mr. Frisbee, did you say something at the end of that? It kind of faded off.
Nope, nothing important.
Okay, any other further discussion? So I have just one point I want to make. I think we have everything we need in the current license to renew it. I understand the concern about repeat behavior, but I do believe, you know, in, you know, giving, I guess I'm an optimist. You know, I want to give one more chance, and then go from there. If something goes awry, then, you know, I think it's within our purview to bring up number 9 under this license, and have another hearing with them, and then consider taking any such action like we would do with any other license. I do understand the desire, the need to put conditions within the license, but given the state of Commonwealth today and where it stands with its restrictions, renewing this means that they still can't perform until such time that that restriction is lifted from the state. And going forward, if the state says that you can have, you know, a certain form of entertainment, you know, within your establishments, and given the description of the premise in which this license applies to, I do believe we have everything we need in this license today. And I, you know, I was on the fence. I was thinking of not renewing it too. I was convinced by some of you that it wasn't, you know, at first it didn't seem like it was something that I would have been in favor of. But after, you know, Mr. Briggs did come out here tonight, he did give some, I'm going back on one of my notes, he did give some assurance that, you know, he would adhere to holding it only inside, just as the license says, and wouldn't have it outside. So I think there is a part there that he mentioned that he would adhere to it. I don't know if it, you know, got lost in the, you know, in the discussion, but I did have that noted here after he responded to my statement and gave, you know, when I asked him for that assurance that he said, you know, he's giving that. You know, he made mention about all of the other people who hold a similar license that, you know, he would like to see them adhere to the same standards, and I would have to agree with them, regardless of if other establishments did or did not have any complaints or violations. You know, maybe I'm a fool and this is going to come back, and, you know, I'm going to be made to eat my words, but that's where I stand on this tonight. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote on this Roy's motion? Mr. Often.
Yeah, I guess just one last comment. Does the board feel like Sean's commentary and sentiment uh, reasonably represents all of the principles of that business? Based on the information that we saw?
Mr. Often, I will tell you, I heard some comments and some rhetoric tonight that I thought really wasn't pertinent to why we were here. And I kind of set that aside. There was some components of it that, I heard Mr. Prisby earlier say, like, was there any admission of, it being wrong and, hey, we're going to do better next time? I didn't hear that. Maybe I missed that. I don't know if the rest of you may have heard that. I'll even go back and listen to this tape again, just to make sure, I heard what I heard. That's how I feel. So, anyone else? Ms. Roy.
I was half expecting to see all three owners tonight and not just one owner, considering that with all that information we were given, Mr. Hanna was responding to a lot of people, so he had some information on what was going on. But that's just to respond to Matt's question.
Anybody else? Mr. Prisby.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I am a little bit interested in doing this again next week on January 5th, not all of this again in rehashing, was because we did have, I was provided with all of the correspondence between the Board of Health and the Health Alliance, not to mention the police reports for the noise complaints. And Sean didn't have that, as he noted. It's not on us to give it to him, and he did make a public records request that was a little bit too late to be responded to by this hearing. But were he to be provided with this, it might have been a more interesting discussion. Maybe we'd have gotten to that point where there was a common understanding. What I'm very afraid of doing is going ahead and saying yes without that common understanding, where we're still on the page of they made a mistake and we're giving them another chance, and they're still on the page of we didn't do anything wrong. Thanks for doing us the favor of renewing, but we don't need your help anyway. Like that's the problem I'm having. Because that particular mindset where we're forcing them outside, no, we're not. Like it's a pandemic. That part of it, I'm genuinely uncomfortable with. And with that part comes this attitude that these rules and regulations aren't legitimate anyway. So if we abide by them, great, we're doing you a solid. If we don't, give us $300 penalty. That's the problem I have without spelling out in detail, at least restrictions, if not just saying yes to what Colleen's proposing, which is, sorry, come back later.
If I may add to that, Mr. Prisby, that $300 fine thing, that's Health Board, Health Alliance related fines. This is a license for renewal. And to your point earlier that this sits solely with us and no other board than the town. And we're going through its due process by offering the hearing like we did earlier tonight. I want to make sure the way I'm making my assessment on this is I guess my test is not solely based on what the Health Alliance process is with regards to any potential violation that would get called out going forward as the one true test about whether or not, okay, do we hold a hearing? It's a myriad of other things. What if we get exhibits of, we see more than two members, outside of a household performing within 10 feet of each other? Is that enough? Is that enough of a test for us to say, yeah, that's a legitimate reason, I think, to come back? And we don't have to wait for a fine. It can be a verbal warning, right? It doesn't have to be, in other words, we can bring them back for any non-compliance. Getting a verbal warning is letting you know verbally you're not being compliant, right? So to me, that satisfies that test. I'm not waiting for, 3 sets of different agencies to finally send somebody out from the state to enforce their own, their own regulations. Ms. Roy.
Just to go back to the fine you spoke on, the one fine that was issued in Grafton for restaurants was not issued by the Alliance. It was issued by the Grafton Board of Health, which is also kind of concerning because of how muddied that situation is when it comes to reunion specifically.
Does anybody have anything else? Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Ms. Roy, could you just read the motion one more time, please?
I didn't write it down. You know what? I'm just gonna rescind the motion.
As person who seconded it, I will accept the rescission. Okay, so we won't be voting on that. All right. At this point, yeah, I think we've kind of gone through a couple of things tonight. Is there any desire to, taking any action tonight by this board? Does it want to wait till January 5th at this point? Mr. Prisby.
I do, and I'm sorry. I know people are eager to resolve this. I think this is one of those cases where putting some real thought into this could be more beneficial than not. I feel like the challenge before us is to balance, again, our need to keep people safe with their need to brand themselves and operate their business how they want to operate it. And I respect that. And I think it would behoove us to give some real thought as to, in this instance, how to use a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer here, and try and figure out how we can both help these guys and help the community by coming up with some restrictions in the license that make some sense that at least we can talk about. And if we get to a point where the restrictions don't make any sense and we end up right back at this point, then I would consider, okay, maybe with a comeback in April. But I think we owe it to the town, ourselves, and Reunion to put some thought into it and come up with something. So I would move that we take this up again on January 5th.
Mr. Hoffman.
I'll second that.
Got a motion made second to continue this discussion and take action on January 5th. Any motion on the discussion or action that we're taking tonight? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I think on balance, after hearing all the information, I'd like to pursue a strategy where we renew with restrictions. It was pointed out tonight that there was another business in town that didn't even have a license that was having outdoor music. So, our granting or not granting, we need to be doing our job in terms of enforcing our license. And I think it would give us a good opportunity to really think deeply about what is it actually that we're concerned about, and how do we help guide that business to achieve those ends. Because clearly everybody on the board here is primarily concerned not about things like noise, but about public safety. So I'd be in favor of discussing this next week and thinking about what can we do to achieve those ends.
Okay. Any further discussion? No. Okay. All right. I'll take a roll call vote on that motion to continue to take this action item up on the status of the license for June 5th. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Prisby.
Prisby, aye.
Mr. Often.
Often aye.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. I want to thank Mr. Terenzini, Mr. Kramer for coming out tonight and sticking through this. All right, so we will take this up again on the 5th. There is no other business tonight. Before we entertain a motion to adjourn, I just want to wish everyone on behalf of the board and the town a happy new year. Let's hope 21 is, I'm sure you guys have all heard this, is better than 20, and we're looking on the up and up. Please stay safe, everybody. Take care of one another, and we will see you next year. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Motion made and seconded. By roll call, please. Mr. Prisby.
Yeah.
Mr. Often.
Often aye.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Clear motion carried.